to determine whether you're in this country illegally and when you have suspicion. I think that's important. I think it was a good ruling. I'm concerned. I believe the president's recent decision on the DREAM Act is a precursor to amnesty. It's going to be very interesting to see if ICE now picks up those that we determine are here illegally like they have in the past.
Sheriff Arpaio, who certainly not averse to getting in front of the cameras, as he did today, to give his opinion of the decision. And once again, depending on what time you asked and who you asked, they either claim victory in some way, shape, or form here. Everybody, we're going to bring in your voice in on this conversation. Toll-free phone lines right on the screen that you can see what you thought of it and also what you think about this debate on a broader level about immigration reform. Now, let's widen our conversation on the High Court's decision today. And for that, let's bring in our table. T.J. McCormick, conservative radio talk show host. Dominic Carter, of course, political journalist and author. Mark Furnish, criminal defense attorney and professor of Brooklyn Law. And he's argued before the Supreme Court, lucky him. And he's been named a New York metro area super lawyer here, so he's got a cape as well. We're joined by Andrew, who you've met
Except
before.
Except when I argue in the Supreme Court.
Exactly.
I'm defrocked at that
Definitely.
point.
You keep that tucked in. And Andrew, you've already met. There's some interesting poll numbers before this that I'll get into, Mark. But first, you know, I know everybody claims victory after a ruling, and some say split decision. But I got the impression when I read through it and it helped me out that, yes, there is some latitude left in Arizona. But if you're in law enforcement, you're probably not taking as many liberties as you did yesterday here, because you really don't need this trouble in your life when this is the job of the feds now, not really the states to decide who and who isn't legal in this country.
Yeah, I don't know how the state could plausibly claim victory in the case. It's a resounding victory for the Obama administration and more fundamentally for the exercise of federal power in the area of immigration. And the decision basically means that it's almost exclusively for the feds to regulate policy in this area, and that's consistent with the plain language of the Constitution itself. So that's just posturing on the part of Arpaio and his minions. And
also Governor Brewer, who said that as well. Justice Kennedy, who wrote the majority opinion, he said in part, Mark, there's a basic uncertainty about what the law means and how it'll be enforced. Was that the crux of the problem? Because you and I could look at two groups of people and come to two different conclusions who is reasonably, in effect, suspicious that may or may not be an illegal immigrant or not. I mean, I've heard other people say, you know, three white guys from Europe walked into the room. They're not going to look as suspicious to maybe someone as three people that have Latino surnames, even if they've been in the country for 150 years.
Well, that's only, that language that you just quoted is only in reference to the fourth provision that was at issue in the case, and that's the only one that has been provisionally sustained. And I emphasize that it's provisionally sustained. That part of the ruling was just procedural. It's not saying that it's valid. It's saying there hasn't been enough preliminary showing to get an injunction against its enforcement. So in an appropriate case, even the fourth part of it will be upheld. But that's sort of the tail wagging the dog. What they did was knock out the three most controversial prongs of the statute. The one that gives Arizona permission to just round up illegals wholesale. The one that gives them permission to prosecute in a misdemeanor fashion for failing to register. And the worst and most sweeping part of it, the one that gives them authority to lock you up and prosecute you if you're an illegal just for looking for work or for cleaning somebody's yard or for being a nanny. All that was wiped out. So don't believe that.
Why leave the show me your papers?
Well, again, it's only been left provisionally, and the reason why...
Can you explain what that means?
Well, they sought a preliminary injunction before the case was litigated on the merits, and all the court held was it hasn't been shown to be so unconstitutional that we'll knock it out at this point before it's fully litigated. And the reason why they left that in place in a provisional way is that complements federal enforcement rather than conflicting with it. All it requires them to do, the Arizona police, is to check with the feds when they stop somebody for legitimate reasons to see if the person has an immigration problem. And they can't prolong the detention just to check on the immigration status. So if they have a legitimate reason that will pass the laugh test under probable cause, then they can stop them.
You know, one of the things, obviously opinions came fast and furious at this, but there was one comment. This came from a Democratic congressman from Illinois, a member of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. And I think he summed up for a lot of people why he thought that this thing could never uphold, this decision, this law could never be upheld, because he said, I know they're not going to be using the kind of tactic on people with the last name Roberts, Romney, or Brewer. But if your last name is something like Gutierrez, who happened to be his last name, or Chung or Obama, watch out. The express goals of the authors of Arizona's SB 1070 is to make life miserable for immigrants so that they'll leave, and a key tool in that effort was upheld by the court. Speak to the fact that it seemed unequal justice right on its face.
I think what we have to do, first of all, I don't want any law on the books that's unconstitutional. And I'll take the court at its word that this thing is unconstitutional. And I'd like to hope that the left will join me should any part of health care be shot down on Thursday. Anyway, that being said, I feel bad for the people of Arizona, because the reason, the impetus for this law being out there was that at the time, a few years ago, a vast majority of the murders being committed in Arizona were being committed by illegal aliens. A vast majority of the breaking and entering, there were home invasions all along the border, up and down, and I'm not making a mountain out of a mole. That was the situation at the time. This wasn't just, see, that's a divisive, awful racist type of statement from that guy in Illinois.
We got to remember the climate. Remember the governor saying all the headless bodies that were being found in the Arizona desert.
That was
never verified at all, and then we we move on.
No, but they did find WMD in that desert. Okay. No, but the point is, though, is that, again, sure, yes, they're gonna be grandstanding. There's going to be some mythical things, but the fact of the matter was the majority of those violent crimes were being committed at the. So this law was not put up there and put on a ballot and then passed it and all that just for the sake of being awful people who didn't like brown-skinned Latinos and preferred Swedish illegal immigrants. This was in a response to a lack of enforcement on the part of the feds. And by the way, something came out later today. Correct me if I'm wrong about this, but you talked about them having to make a phone call on somebody that they detained. Didn't Homeland Security come out and say earlier this afternoon that they were more than likely not going to be taking as many of those calls, that it's going to be a real test for them to literally answer the call?
Well, that's true, and they noted that in the opinion because they're available. First of all, Homeland Security, ICE, DHS, they're available 24/7 as is. So this fourth provision that was provisionally sustained doesn't impose any really new burdens than they did.
Napolitano said they're not going to be really taking a lot of those calls. That's how they responded to this. Is that not spiking the football on the part of the administration? We won this one, so you know what? On top of that, don't even call us. We're not even going to answer.
I think that's posturing.
Well, that's me.
Practicing in this area with border cases, and I have plenty of them, there's no laxity of enforcement on the part of ICE and Homeland Security. I think the problem is that there are so many people penetrating that porous border that absolute compliance is impossible to achieve.
We'll get into it. I'm not trying to get into a whole philosophical issue or even a debate about immigration reform, but because there has been no real reform, you have this persistent problem, and everyone's trying to come up with a Band-Aid to fix the issue.
True.
And I'm sorry, but if I lived in Arizona and I have last name of Gonzalez, and I've been in there for 150 years, I think I got a better chance of getting maybe asked to be shown my papers than Andrew, who might have moved there 2 years ago. And to me, at the crux of it, that's not what America was about.
But if I'm Gonzalez, been there for 150 years, all respect. If I'm Gonzalez, 150 years, I'm ticked off at Gonzalez for 6 hours, who came in under that fence. That's who I'm ticked off at if I'm 150 years Gonzalez.